And a very good evening to you. If you're joining us from Guyana, very good evening. If you're joining us from the wider Caribbean and North America, good evening. If you're in the west coast of the United States of America, it's afternoon. And of course, good evening to you in Canada. And those of you who are joining us from Europe, in England, good night to you. Good night to you. We are in different time zones, so people are joining us at different times. And when we say good evening and don't say good night or good afternoon, we can be accused of bias. Welcome to our Monday night edition. This is our first Monday night edition of Politics 101. Tonight, we are going to look at Mocha. We're going to look at Mocha as the title for the show suggests, justice for the people of Mocha. That's what we'll be discussing tonight. We have talked about the politics of it over the last few weeks. And tonight we want to pivot somewhat and we want to look at the other side of this case because this issue is not just a political issue. It's also a legal issue. It's also a human rights issue. And sometimes we political people look at one dimension of a matter and we fail to look at the other dimensions. What happened at Mocha is, as I said, it's a legal issue and it is a human rights issue, an issue of rights, human rights, constitutional rights, and so therefore there are other dimensions to what happened at Mocha. Tonight, we're going to shine light on the legal aspect of what happened at Mocha. Those of you who've been following the news, certainly in the Marara waves. I am trying to remember whether I saw the news story in the other media outlets, but as you know, this matter has gone to court. This matter has gone to court, and we have the lawyers here tonight who are going to walk us through the legal aspects of this case, the legal consequences, the legal ramifications. So tonight, we are going to court. Tonight, we are going to court. You know, lawyers are very, as the older people in the village would say, lawyers are particular people. So, be very careful about how one discusses that matter. But lawyers are trained to deal with such issues. So welcome to Politics 101. We're going to have the two lawyers in that case, Mr. Vivian Williams, Dr. Vivian Williams. He was there a couple of weeks ago dealing with the Ipadaji case that is before the court. And we have Mr. Lyndon Amsterdam on. It's good. It's good. Let me say to you all, it pleases my heart to see other names. You know, whenever these cases come up, you hear Nigel Hughes, Nigel Hughes, Nigel Hughes. And it's good to see other lawyers who are coming up. I never tire of saying on this program, as a young political activist in the 1970s and 1980s, I had two lawyers volunteer to defend me, and not just in the big case that I had, but also in small cases. The late, and I can say great, Peter Britton was one of my lawyers. I mean, as we would say in the village, he wasn't a poo-poo lawyer, and he volunteered to defend me. And Benji Gibson, those were two giants in the legal field. And those were my two lawyers, and my colleagues in the WPA and others, they had other lawyers, P.O. Adams, Odell Adams, Dudnat Singh, some of the big names, the luminaries of that time, would come to the WPA office and ask to defend us. So it's good to see younger lawyers who are getting in to the business of defending those who are in need of defense as they continue their political activism and other forms of activism. Of course, we have people like Selwyn Peters. We have young Darren Whale. But like I said, compared to when I was a young activist 40 years ago, 40 odd years ago, the big names in the profession would come out. They saw it as part of their profession, part of their calling. And so it's good to see some other names coming forward. So we're going to be talking to the two lawyers in this case, Justice for the people of Mocha. And please share the link and let others know that we're on tonight. It's Monday night. I know you all are not accustomed to having me on Monday night, but I'm going 5 nights per week now because we've added the Friday night edition, and now we're adding the Monday night edition. There is, of course, a demand for these types of shows. You know, we have our particular brand on Politics 101 that we deal with the hard matters. Sometimes we go militant, sometimes we go radical, but at all times we seek to bring informed perspectives. We seek to bring critical analysis, and we seek to look at the different dimensions of this issue, of these issues that we deal with. I would be remiss, I would be failing in my duty as a public educator, as a political activist, a social activist, if I were to concentrate on just what the Americans call red meat. You know, man shall not live by bread alone, and man shall not live by red meat alone. You know, there are those who are vegetarians. There are those who eat other meat other than red meat. So we've got to mix the thing up, you know. And at the end of the day, I'm an educator and I am a political activist also. So there has to be some education. Tonight we're going to court. We are going to court. Please share the link. Let everyone know we're on. You know, Lord, somebody sent me on Saturday that link of, you know, them tearing down a woman's fence and part of her house there on Sherry Street. When is this going to end? When is this going to end? I mean, we've become a demolition country. You know, it bleeds my heart, and you know, but I'm going to deal with that tomorrow night. I'm going to deal with it tomorrow night. Tomorrow night, I'm having Ganesh Mahipal on, and we're going to deal with some of those issues. Tonight, we want to focus again on Mocha, you know, because we are always accused, whenever you're in the opposition, that something happens, we make a big noise about it, and then we let it go. And last night, I had a little gathering because, you know, it was a Super Bowl in Arizona and Rihanna was singing, so it was a big deal for the West Indian community here. And one of the persons asked me, Professor, what happened to the Mocha thing? It just died on just like that? What happened? Did people get any money? What? And I couldn't say at the time because I had not spoken to the lawyers about coming on, but I told her that no, the matter is not over. And here we are tonight. We are going to look at the other dimension of the matter. Good evening, Valdine. Good evening, Ormo Older. Yvonne, good evening. I haven't seen you in a long time. Good evening and welcome to Politics 101. As I said, we're going to go tonight. We climbing up the step. We're climbing up, it's called the winding step, or you go upstairs. And we're having the two lawyers, Mr. Lyndon Amsterdam and Dr. Vivian Williams, the lawyers for the people at Mocha. No, we are not leaving the people of Mocha alone. Last week, Vincent Alexander was on, and he said that IPADG as a fund and they had raised up to about, I think, $3,000 up to last week. And they shared information with you here. And I ask you all to go and to contribute to that fund. Tell them I sent you. Tell them I sent you. We have to put our money where our mouths are. We cannot allow this issue to die. We cannot allow this issue to be caught up in politics alone. Because you see, that's when an issue dies. If you look at the issue from just the political standpoint, and then when you don't get any victories from the politics, the story dead. And we have to look at this thing in its multiple dimensions. Our people, our Guyanese people, our West Indian people, our so-called third world people, our black and brown people, people of color, we have always had to fight. We have always had to fight at different levels at the same time. Black Americans call it code switch. We've always had to fight at different levels. It is why it is no accident that our parents chose what they sent us to school to study. And people always say, they send me to study law and doctor. But they had a keen sense of the law. And they know what it was to be defenseless before the law. So it was an accident when they sent the picnic for go and study law. And they understood what health means. And that's why they wanted us to be lawyers and doctors. Sometimes we cry them down, they didn't want we to be other things and so on. But they had a keen sense of the importance of the law. Because slavery was by law. Indentureship was by law. It wasn't somebody who come and say, I don't like black people, I'm going to enslave them. It was the law. And in the United States of America, the NAACP, they took on the law. They were the other civil rights groups that did other things. And sometimes we believe that we must only fight one way, boots on the ground. I like boots on the ground. But I've been around this thing long enough to know that boots is not the only thing that's going to set us free. It's boots plus defense before the law, plus our human rights advocacy. Very important because we are human beings. We are human beings with human rights. Good evening, everyone, and let me just go ahead because I think we are all gathered and ready for court tonight. And I know some of y'all is more liar than liar. There's a kind of native understanding of the law that has always intrigued me ever since I was a young man. Let me bring in my guest. Good evening, Mr. Amsterdam.
Good evening, Dr. Hines.
Thank you very much. And the first time we're meeting, we might have crossed paths somewhere, but the first time you're getting to talk, welcome to Politics 101. And good evening, Mr. Vivian Williams, who I have known since he was a journalist at Channel 28, as we used to say, Vera. And then he went off and studied law. Gentlemen, welcome to Politics 101.
Good evening, and thank you very much.
In the introduction, as you might have heard, I talked about the different dimensions of what we see as political issues, but that there are different dimensions to these issues, and sometimes we fall somewhat short when we don't take into consideration the varied dimensions of an act of government. We think about government only in political terms. A lot of the time, not all of the time, but a lot of the time. And we forget that there are other dimensions. I just want to get your opening comments on that perspective that I've put forward. Since you're new, Mr. Amsterdam, I let you take the new ball, like Tate Narine and the ball.
Good evening again. Good evening to everyone listening. Um, I, as you've introduced me, I'm an attorney at law, and I treat that as my calling, and I stick to my lane, so to speak. I was approached by a couple of concerned persons with regards to the plight of the persons who had their homes broken down at the Caneview, Mocha area. And I was asked to lend my assistance professionally to see if I can get some form of relief, compensation, redress, whatever you want to call it. And over the past month or so, I have been engaged in talking to some of these people and gathering information historically and presently as to what occurred and the events, the chronicle of events which led to the ultimate demolition of their homes, destruction of their property, in some cases, destruction of livestock and other valuables. And so myself and Mr. Williams, and hopefully some other lawyers, we hope to pursue some form of redress for these persons in light of their unfortunate experience with officials of the representing the government and the state.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Amsterdam, saying there how we got involved with the case. Dr. Williams, how did you get involved in this case? I know, as I said in the introduction, you're also involved in another case, that is the case. How did you come to get involved in this case? And if you can throw in the law as an important aspect of the struggle for justice, social justice, political justice, human rights, etc.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hines. So I would take the invitation to address the law and other aspects of life in society, such as the human rights, the social aspect, and the economic dimension of life in a society. But I was drawn to this matter in a similar way that Mr. Amsterdam indicates that he was drawn to the matter. My involvement came after listening on the telephone to someone I know very well, and that person is not directly affected by what transpired in Mocha, but had a sense of what should have happened and what should not have happened, and therefore requested my involvement to pursue any options that might be available to the people. And what drew my sort of involvement really was the depth of the emotion expressed by that person at the time that he was speaking to me. And I had a great sense of the hurt from someone who was not directly affected by what had transpired. And after listening to that, that person asked one question: whether or not there were people who were willing to at least explore justice for the people who were directly affected. I was moved by that, and I immediately indicated to that individual that if he were able to take some steps to mobilize the involvement of some people others in Guyana and to begin to explore possibilities of a legal team being put together, I would be happy to lend my service. And at that time, I was starting with a complete blank slate, not having any sort of historical knowledge of the incident. But it was the cry for help that drew me to this matter, and I want to say that from the outset. It was a cry for help coming from someone who was not directly affected, but who knew people that were directly affected and who was intricately involved, or who is intricately involved in the Mocha Arcadia community. And that's how I made my entry into this matter. And I would like to follow up also by saying that law does not exist in isolation. Law exists in the context of the social and economic realities of a country. And that is why we speak of social justice and economic justice, because we cannot in any way separate what is law and what is legal and what is justice in the context of our jurisprudence from the impact of the law and judgments of court and decisions of authorities upon the lives of people within a society. And here in the United States, where I am based, I, for instance, have pursued studies in law and economics, and lots of economic principles are the foundation of legal doctrines that are used, because very often when we see a law um, pertaining to particular matters, it is not a law in isolation. It draws from principles of economics and principles of social reality and human behavior. So we really can't separate law from the economic impact upon the lives of people within a society and the social realities of that society. And so that would be my response to your question.
Thank you very much. And before I get into the matter itself, let me allow Mr. Amsterdam a little bit, a couple more minutes. I notice you're a canal number 2 man, West Bank. My audience are always very quick with the kind of information. I don't have to ask you that question, which part of Guyana are you from? You already give me that information. But Mr. Amsterdam, I mean, what drew you to law? Why not science? Why all the excitement around science and STEM and all this thing? Why not medicine or science or the humanities? Why law?
Just let me clear up. I was born, well, they call it number 2 canal. It's really Standy Tongue. The beginning of the road is and you know, something like what you have High Street and Avenue Republic.
Right.
Or Wellington Street, and it continues on to one part is Wellington, the other part is what you call it again. But it's a sort of thing like that. Bagotville number 2 and number 1 canal.
Number 1, right.
So I'm really born in Standy Tongue. Yeah. But what a lot of people don't know is that my navel string is buried in Mocha. My mother and several other relatives. If I want tonight, I can go into Mocha and I have an option of about 10 different houses that I can sleep in. Because historically what happened, when one person found a grounding in a village, you found that the other relatives will somehow gravitate to that village. And so historically in these villages, you would find several members of one family living in that village. It is changing a bit today, especially in Black families where the yearning for the grounding in family traditions and family roots is not as strong as I think it used to be. But I'm sure if you go through many villages in this, you're there, them people are, them from so or yeah, and then you're there, how many of them, the house there and the house there, and look another set over there and so on. So I have a strong roots in Mocha, as we call it. Some people would say Mocha.
Mocha, yes, I was noticing you saying Mocha.
It depends on where you want to put the emphasis. Right? So I have a great groundings in, but I'm a country boy through and through. So from one country village to another at Standytown, where my parents eventually settled. In terms of my being drawn to law, it's a bit of a irony and a bit of a paradox. Because if you speak to many of my classmates, especially in primary school, I would be the last person that anyone might have thought would have studied law based on people's perception of who are the ideal persons for law. And I say that because I was a very introverted and quiet student. I think I still am. And that seemed inconsistent with somebody who wanted to study law, where lawyers are supposed to be vociferous and talkative and aggressive and all these things. And I remember when I was in third form, and those days it probably still is, you were streamed after third form. And so from early in your third form year, your form master or mistress would start telling you, or sometimes it starts even from second form, start thinking what you want to do in life, because you have to decide whether you want to do the sciences or the arts or business. Or tell what you want to do, and we'll guide you as to what subjects you need to concentrate. So I remember I was in North Georgetown then, and there was a teacher from England, Miss Flynn. I think she was a VSO, and she was a form mistress. And when the time came, she was going through the class, and she came to, and by the way, my name is Lyndon, not Linden. The bright ones are the ones that name Linden. The ones that are not so bright, they name them Lyndon. Close, but not, So she said to me, so Lyndon, what do you want to be? And I said, I want to be a lawyer. The class went quiet. She looked up with a stunned look. I said, that's good, Lyndon. But lawyers have to talk. You don't talk. Anyhow, if that's what you want to do, I'll encourage you to go ahead. My father also was somebody who was very strong about his children pursuing academia. And his position was he couldn't give us a whole lot of money. He didn't have plantations, but he promised us that he will do whatever to ensure we get a sound education. And with a little, he was the only breadwinner. He also quizzed me as to what I hope to become later in life. Again, I told him that I want to study law, and he didn't miss a beat. After then, since at that tender age, he began to tell people that this is going to be the lawyer in the family. And he will continuously regale me. He was somebody who, he was one of those court spectators. And he could have told so many stories about the excellent lawyers back in the days, some of those names that you called. Joffanes was his favorite, Lionel Loku, B.O. Adams. And he will go through stories and cases that he would have listened to. And so with that encouragement, and one of the things, I was a voracious reader. And any novel that had a story with a court case, I will hold on to that book and begin to picture in my mind the lawyers and how they pursued and advocated their cases on behalf of their clients, and begin to imagine myself one day being in that position. Now, I could tell you my journey was a very difficult one, coming from a very humble background. And there were times when, because of economic reasons, I thought of studying another profession. I actually had enrolled at some point for economics because I couldn't afford to go to K-Ville and couldn't get a scholarship. Even though I've signed up and I was admitted, something in me said, you're pursuing something that you have no desire, no enthusiasm. I am not going to. And I never, eventually the program came to Guyana under the PPP government. I think it was in 94. And I was able to continue my studies and then move on to UWorden. Within my introvert nature, what a lot of people found out later on is that I was a fierce debater. And so law gave me an opportunity. I like to pit my brains, my thoughts, my little learning against other people and to see how that works out. I like to explore academia, knowledge, and all the rest of it. Then later on in life, I had some experiences with members of the police force at my place of work and so on. And those experiences fortified me into my view that I should pursue law. Not only because of the love of it, but because I realized that I wanted to be in a profession that allowed me to be my own boss, to manage my own affairs. Like, for example, as I said, my first job, I worked at the Guyana National Cooperative Bank. And why is it that some enjoyable experiences? One of the things I realized is that when you are in a system with hierarchical, very often when your boss says jump, you have to jump. The most you can do is not ask why, is how I. And I found myself being managed and supervised by persons who sometimes their ideas run counter to mine, but I had to carry out their instructions because they're my superior. Law allows me the latitude. After I've done my research, after I've analyzed whatever, I am not averse to hearing the ideas of a colleague or someone else, but ultimately, I now had the opportunity of, this is my call, and this is how I'm going to pursue this matter. And it didn't matter if you're senior in years to the bar, if you said this, or if in the case the learned judge or magistrate thinks otherwise, I had an avenue to try to prove them wrong. And all those things are things that culminated into fortifying me into my view that law is the way to go. Some other people will tell you, you do the right thing. He's strong-headed, you know. When he hold on to a view, can't get even change his mind. I hold strong, not that I'm unshakable. I hold strong to views. And I hold strong to the belief that if you don't stand for something, you will fall for anything. So some people see me as being strong-headed and self-opinionated. They may have some truth in it. But law allows me that avenue to be who I am and to be myself. And to get the joy very often of seeing people who are disenfranchised, people who are disadvantaged, people who are in a difficult circumstance, when you can take sometimes what appears to be a hopeless case and get a positive results for them, it is something that gives you a feeling of joy and exhilaration that there are few things that can compare to that.
Few things that can compare to that, Mr. Linden, Amsterdam attorney at law. And we're discussing tonight the case that was brought on by those people in Mocha, Arcadia, the people at Caneview, whose homes were demolished. We watched that scenario night after night on this program and other programs. It's imprinted on our minds, so we can't miss it. Now they've gone to court, and I have the two attorneys here tonight. You were just being introduced there to Mr. Linden Amsterdam. As he said, he's partly from Mocha, partly from Stanleytown. Good evening to the people of Stanleytown. I did a lot of work in Stanleytown and Sisters Village and so forth there with Coffee 250. A few years ago, I'm very, very familiar with Stanleytown. Mr. Williams, Dr. Williams, let me bring you in here. So we know about the politics of this case. What are the legal dimensions of this case? What are the legal dimensions of this?
Well, to begin with, what I want to point out is that I want to correct one thing that you said, that we have gone to court. We haven't yet gone to court, and it is right to say that we haven't gone to court. And that is an important point to note. It also
you're seeking mediation before you go to court.
Right. It also informs how I will answer your question.
Good, fair enough. Go right ahead.
Let me say that what we would say at this stage is that the idea that the people at Caneview whose homes were demolished are without legal remedy, and that they were simply in some sort of a black letter legal reality that they had, and they were without rights, that's an error in thought. That in fact, having reviewed the facts and circumstances in this case, that those residents of Caneview whose homes were demolished have strong causes of action in law. What those causes of action in law are, at this point in time, we're not going to say what those causes of action are. We have taken the step of commencing a process. One may say that once lawyers get involved, that a legal process has started. But we have started a process of seeking to communicate with the government and initiate talks with the government, hoping that I know they might not be in the context of Guyana much faith in resolution and thoughts and talks and mediation and sort of working out disputes. But we have taken that approach, which I think it's a good and proper way and place to start. The extent to which parties in a society, actors in a society, those with authority and those without, are able to work through their differences is an indication of the nature and quality of that society. More important than the structures that are going up in that society. And therefore, for a matter such as this one, with severe economic and social consequences, that we think that the authorities would be and should be willing to at least hear from the representatives of the people, the legal representatives of the people, with respect to the merit and the strength of their legal rights, which we argue were infringed and for which they should be justly compensated or remedied. Uh, in fairness to the talks we seek to initiate, we do not at this point in time want to litigate the matter, except to caution that we are not walking with straw in our hands, that what we have, we think, is a strong metal that could produce uh, a just outcome for the people we represent. So that's where I would put it at this point. Co-counsel Amsterdam may have some additional words with respect to that question, but I, from my standpoint, that I think it's important for even where we have a reluctant authority, and we're not at this point saying that the government is reluctant, but a timeline, the time that we ask for which for them to respond to initiate talks is a few days away, and we think that government should lead the way in sort of moving disputes from disputes to resolution, and a whole process of what is described as sense making. And we could begin with sense making with matters as of this nature. It is for the government to show its willingness to engage in sense making, rather than simply for parties and actors within the country to begin duking it out. If it comes to climbing the court steps and doing that, we would caution that we are not walking with this mere branch in or straw in our hands.
We're not walking with straw in our hands. Attorney Amsterdam, you want to add anything to that overview of the matter?
I totally agree with Dr. Williams. Our in some people believe in war, there has to be hot war before you get cold war. We have the belief that, and I hate to use the word war, but it's adversarial. We believe that the first option should be to try to have a non-adversarial and quick resolution to this matter if the parties sit around the table with a view to accepting that there are people whose livelihoods and their whole lives have been uprooted in the most, I would say, cruel manner, because it's not easy to one day have a roof over your head and the next day find yourself out with all of your household articles and everything destroyed. And on a wider level, it is, to me, an indictment on us as a country with 83,000 square miles and less than 1 million people. And we have an ongoing problem with land and finding land for people. The other thing about this matter is when I heard about it through the news, I was really of the view that these persons were occupying an area of land where that impeded the construction of the road. In other words, put simply, wherever they were residing was where the road had to pass. But in speaking to these people, I have found out, if their stories are to be believed, they are not, the road is not going to be passing where they had their houses and their livelihoods and livestock and shops and all the rest of it. In fact, they have said to me that they were told they need to move because the noise and the dust is going to affect them. So, and I think there are other people in the society who believes also that these people were in the way of the road. So we don't come trying to issue any threats or anything like that. We come in a humanitarian manner to ask that let us sit around the table. We want to represent these people and we want to see how we can work this out to have some redress. Of course, if that doesn't work out, we believe that we have alternatives which we will explore. But that's our first approach to this matter. Because what it does also, it avoids any lengthy litigation and all the acrimony that goes with that. And certainly, from a humanitarian standpoint, we as lawyers would like to have an early resolution of this matter so that these people can try to repair and rebuild their lives in some way. So that is our approach, and we now await to see the response or non-response from the government.
There you have it, the two lawyers that are attached to the case of the people at Mocha whose homes were demolished. We saw it over and over. Some of us were there on the ground and we saw it live. And here are two lawyers who are saying the approach we are going to take is that before we go to court, we are giving the government a chance to come to the table and to work out this matter and to, in a sense, bring some kind of amicable resolution that is, of course, in keeping with the wishes of the people who are affected and their extended family. So they're not in court yet. They're not in court yet. They're not in court yet. Backstage, the MP for that region, Nima Flubes, she's backstage. She's coming in and out, having some technical difficulty. But as soon as she's back on, I will bring her in. Let me bring back in Dr. Williams. Dr. Williams, is it normal in these matters for you to seek mediation before actually go to court? Is it part of our jurisprudence in this part of the world, in Guyana, in the English-speaking Caribbean?
It is. mediation and an attempt to resolve dispute really is at the heart and fabric of common sense and sense making. And one doesn't have to look to the practice within a jurisdiction to recognize the value of and the gains to a society when parties who have disputes could sit around a table and try to see how that dispute could be resolved. Litigation is not a costless exercise, and I'd like to make this point that when the state is involved in litigation, taxpayers must recognize that their money that could be used for other purposes is being used for litigation. It is not a costless exercise. That the judicial system itself is burdened by litigation. And so the purpose is not just simply to engage in litigation just to say, I won, you lost. You could have resolution to disputes where both sides could feel a sense of justice and both sides could feel that they are, in fact, winners. But I'd like to answer your question more directly to say that the jurisprudence in the Caribbean and more so in the British system encourages attempts to sort of mediate. I don't think that call from the procedural aspect of our jurisprudence has really been followed. So what we have usually are pre-action protocol letters that don't really, I think, strongly pursue resolution. It's treated more as a formality. So you would have matters where this pre-action letter is being sent out just as a matter of formality, as something that I'm doing for the sake of doing. In this case, what we are trying to do is try to give it a real opportunity for success and to see how it works. We could sit here tonight and begin to do a dissertation as to why the action taken is not legally sufficient and in fact is not within the law, and we could try to do all sorts of things to score points and to try to embarrass or however you might put it. But that's not the purpose. The idea is we could sit with representatives from the government within closed doors and make those points to the government and say, here is where we think you erred, and here is where we think the strength of our client's case rests. And then the sides could basically look at it, and maybe officials of the government that engage in that exercise may begin to see their actions differently. The parties may be able to reach resolutions for the benefit of society and for the good of society, and where there is some sort of benefit that society has, not necessarily fighting it out and I win and you lose in the court. I want to make another point with respect to the idea of, in fact, I have another point I wanted to make, but making that one, it went right through. As soon as I recall, I'll come back. But there's
you will come back. You will come back. And before I go,
but I'll come back with that.
Yes, before I go to Mr. Amsterdam, because I want to ask Mr. Amsterdam and you, Mr. Williams, what are the benefits of mediation in this case? You've talked about the benefits of mediation generally, but what are the benefits of mediation in this case, Mr. Amsterdam? And if Mr. Williams has some comments he can come into. But before you come in, Mr. Amsterdam, let me just welcome Mr. Peters. Selwyn Peters, I mentioned him at the beginning of the show when I was talking about the few lawyers who are doing these kinds of cases. And of course, Selwyn, and I can call him Selwyn, he's a friend of mine. Selwyn is involved in the petition case, and I saw a question earlier for me to give an update on where the petition case was. I think the mentioned February 8th. And so I'm glad, Selwyn, that you're on. If we can arrange for you to do a similar update as your brothers are doing here tonight on the petition case, because there was something in the news. I knew you circulated something in terms of where the petition is at the moment. But I'll contact you when I'm finished with the show for us to arrange for you to do an update. Selwyn Peters, who practices in Canada and also in Guyana, and somebody asked, I put the question on the screen, whether Mr. Williams, Dr. Williams, is admitted to the bar in Guyana. Yes, when he was here last week, he did say that he's admitted to practice in Guyana. It's good to see our brothers and sister lawyers who are practicing outside of Guyana also practicing in Guyana, you know, and that artificial barrier that we put between them who the outside and them who inside. You all know how I feel about that. And so it's good to see lawyers are living and working, I like to say working. Lawyers are working outside of Guyana, but are also living in Guyana in the sense that they are committed. They are committed to the country, our country. Mr. Amsterdam, what's the benefit of mediation in this case in part?
Costs. Costs in terms, as a country, I don't think we put a cost to time. Dr. Williams alluded to it as to when there's litigation, there's costs, taxpayers' money, both from the Attorney General chambers and the judiciary. But there's anything that allows you to save time has an measurable and sometimes immeasurable cost saving to it. So in terms of the persons who are aggrieved, they can have some resolution, and in this case, something tangible to move on in their lives rather than wait for months and years for a determination of the court, by the court. When there's litigation, you have three possible layers to overcome before it is finally resolved. The High Court, the Court of Appeal, and ultimately the Caribbean Court of Justice. The length of time that may take is anybody's guess, even getting out of the first stage, which is at the High Court. In terms of the state, if there's litigation, lawyers have to be assigned to the matter. Persons from the various ministries have to give information, give witness statement, all kinds of things and spend time on things that they otherwise could have used their time differently. And where you have a mediated resolution, when that is arrived at, or if it is arrived at, you know that that brings finality and closure to the issue. So if you have a resolution and you get $8 million within a few months, what you've gotten is more than $8 million. Because one, you've gotten it in a shorter time. Two, you can start building back your life. And three, in a country and world where inflation is running rampant, when you have to wait 10 years, 5 years, for that same $8 million, the value that it is in 2023 will not be the value in 2030 or 2025. And the other thing about it is this. Sometimes, and I say it quietly, lawyers or persons working in the Attorney General chambers or the DPP see themselves as state lawyers representing the government or the state. But I also, and there are cases on it, they're really representing the people. So when a person is aggrieved and claim that their constitutional rights, for example, have been infringed, the state should have an interest, if that person has a valid complaint, in ensuring that it is resolved in an amicable way. Because it's part of the responsibility of the state to protect its citizens and their rights. So when we are advocating for the rights of these people, this should not be the concern of myself and Dr. Williams and any other lawyers alone. It should be the concern of the state actors and the state agencies, because they're not there to represent the ministers of the government. They're there to represent the people. That is why in Parliament they call them the representatives of the people. So, like a home where parents should be concerned about the children in their home, and every one of them, not selectively, state agencies needs to start looking out for the general populace and the citizens of this country, if they are truly representative of the people. So we see mediation, resolution as being a win-win situation, because what it also does is that when a state agency, if there's an infringement, say, we were wrong to you and we want to use a look, make it up, it cushions any bitterness that a person may harbor in their heart. It's one thing to pass a person and mash their toe, suck your teeth and walk away. It's another thing to mash the toe and turn back and say, sorry. Is your feet damaged? I'm really, So we're not necessarily demanding an apology or anything like that, but I'm just giving an example of how, if a wrong is done, how the wrongdoer, if they think they have done wrong, can make it up to the person who is wrong and create a win-win situation.
Attorney at law, Linden, Amsterdam, talking there about the benefits of mediation in the case that has to do with the demolition of the homes of the people at Mocha. Of course, there is a fierce debate going on among viewers as to whether the lawyers should have intervened before. And I have posted a comment there by Carl Miller, who said lawyers always address a crime after it's committed, not before or during. Now that they have all the information they need, they are going to apply the law. So let's be patient and wait. And I posted this comment. There was another comment that said, forget about what happened before, they're now on board. And as I said, I know the frustration that people feel, and they want quick solutions, and everyone would love quick solutions. But as a veteran in this thing, I have to tell you Sometimes solutions come like a thief in the night, but it's not going to come if you don't work for it. It was Frederick Douglass who said, we want the tree to grow without tilling the soil and so on. But I know there's frustration, but I think
Dr. If you just allow me. I'm not happy the way, what I would say, there's some sloth in our justice system. I say that not to knock the persons in the system, because for example, our judiciary is seriously short of judges. It is out there in the public domain. The Judicial Service Commission has not been constituted for a number of years. New judges have not been appointed. There are judges who have retired since, and so on. But I find that we live in a society where persons want everything to be like instant coffee. And it is something that I continuously repeat to persons. If you want magic, then you're in the wrong chamber. Magicians create illusions and quick, whatever, and everybody clap. The real world in which I live and which I operate, very often results takes time. But we have an impatient, and I often see it sometimes when there's a crime. I don't want to digress. And persons want the police to solve the crime in a matter of days. I know 3 days pass and then charge nobody yet. And then when it goes to court, they want these things to begin with. A person doesn't know or do not know how much preparation is required before you decide to file anything in court. And it is said, lawyers do not win their cases in court. They win it at their desk. And that is to say, the preparation that you do very often decides your level of success in the courtroom. And a lot of times people believe that what they see in the courtroom is all there is to it. Just before I came onto your program, I just came out of my office. And people do not imagine the amount of reading and research is required by a lawyer to properly prepare a case. Very often the lawyer comes in and he may call you to sign an affidavit, and you see it is so many paragraphs and you think, oh, he must be prepared in 10 minutes. You do not know how many drafts, scratches, look back at it, before that final draft is given to you to sign. And so, as I said, we have a society where people want everything to be like a fast food or instant coffee. The practice of law, especially civil litigation, involves time, hard work, and preparation.
Time, hard work, and preparation. And I want to say that Representative Nima Flew Best tried her best. She came into the studio a couple of times and she got knocked off. As you all know how unstable the story is there in Guyana as far as internet is concerned. One of the ironies of our time, high GDP and all the things that we have, but we can't get our internet to work properly. We're going to try to see if we get around tomorrow night. Ganesh Mahai Paul is going to be here, and hopefully tomorrow night she gets some better reception. But you're not losing much, because I'm having an extended discussion here with the two lawyers who are attached thus far to the case of the people at Mocha whose homes were demolished. Here is the good news, my brothers and sisters. The people are not left out there on their own. We know that the political people are doing their political thing. We know Ipadaji is raising some money for them. And now we have lawyers who have taken up a case. They're going to mediation first. They're seeking mediation. And if mediation is not successful, then they will have to take the other steps. And in keeping with the tradition of our show, both lawyers are here tonight to report to you on what is going on with this matter so that you are informed. You know, they say we make trouble on these programs. And I like to tell my PPP friends when I meet them, you know, you all have no idea what trouble is. Maybe you all recognize good trouble and you're all trying to turn it into bad trouble. The trouble that we are making here tonight is that we are informing you all that the people of Mocha are not being left on their own. And secondly, we are giving you all here, the lawyers, the legal dimensions of that case. Mr. Williams, have you recalled what you had forgotten a while ago? If so, now is your time. Speak now.
Or forever hold your peace.
I wouldn't say that because I want you to come back.
So while Mr. Amsterdam was speaking, I recall what I wanted to say, and which I think is very important. And two other things I picked up from what he said that I want to address, and I'll do that very quickly. I'll start from the issue of mediation and the benefit of it. What I want to add to what he said is conflict resolution is a speedy conflict resolution provides a benefit to a society that is difficult to attach a price to. And it is in the interest of the authorities, the state, and members of a society to encourage speedy resolution of conflict. Mr. Amsterdam correctly pointed out that when you have mediation, you have parties that are reaching a point where they both feel that they have been made whole. In an adversarial situation in court, one party leaves the courtroom feeling hurt and feeling as if he, she, or it has been done an injustice. Mediation helps to resolve things, and there is a value that one cannot attach a price to conflict resolution. So we need to encourage a society that pursues conflict resolution rather than a society that pursues conflict to its end, conflict to the point of destruction. And so that's a very important value of the mediated approach that we need to pursue. There is the point that I forgot that I want to mention is this, that development and displacement. Do we have to have a situation where development creates displacement and creates destruction? Modern societies have gotten to the point where development doesn't always, with innovation, thought, and careful planning, lead to displacement. And the question that we ought to ask as a society is whether displacement was in fact of absolute necessity in order to achieve the development we pursue. Societies are being built where even one single tree, one single plant is not displaced. And creativity, innovation, and thought give rise to development around the existing ecosystem. In the case of Caneview, one of the things that I want to leave tonight is that there was, in fact, a community with an ecosystem that was not objected to, that was encouraged, and that existed for a long period of time. And could there have been development around the existing ecosystem, displacement and destruction? Now that's a question of where social law and social justice interact. But that's an important question that ought to be considered from when we think of this Caneview situation. Here is the other point that I would like to leave with: that the government's the demolition process and the manner in which the displacement was done was not upon the basis of eminent domain. There might have been talks about the need to pursue the building of a road, but that was not the path, because if the government had gone down that path, you would have had a complete different approach to it. You would have had consultation with the community and communities involved, and the impact assessment, and all of that would have led to sense making. And so you would have had all of this taking place up front. So it is one thing to say what the disadvantaged and vulnerable people should have done before and what could have been done by the disadvantaged people. But one must not forget to ask the question, what could have been done by the authorities that have the knowledge, the institution, the framework, and the capital to do these things? And here is where, yes, mediation and a proper approach to development that requires time and the pursuit of a feeling of a just outcome could have been pursued. The third thing that I want to address is a question you indicate one of your viewers posted, and which is, why only now? Why the lawyers were not involved before? Well, I'd like to refer back to the legal system in Guyana. Guyana does not allow lawyers to solicit. There's a no solicitation policy in the Caribbean generally. So myself and Mr. Amsterdam and any number of lawyers could not have solicited clients, could not have gone out and say, here are your rights, here's how here's what you could have done. And when you have vulnerable societies and vulnerable people, there are lots of considerations involved in litigation. And even when people are harmed, particularly in where you have social injustice, you still have to have a process of retention. And that process of retention requires a client who is willing to pursue the path that involves lawyers. And not always people are willing to do that. And that burden cannot just simply be thrown to the people and say, you could have done this, you should have done that. I believe, and I very often say, that the system that says that lawyers should not present to the people the benefits of their knowledge, the benefit of their understanding of the law, and the protections that the people have, is one that really should be relooked, because what it does, it prevents people from knowing what are the options available to them. You could only know what are the options available to you if that is presented to you. And you would see in the United States, when there is an injustice that affects a large group of people, you would have the legal community would sort of educate people. And after people are educated, they would make informed decisions and choices. The people at Caneview didn't have that benefit. I couldn't have simply begun contacting people by telephone and say, hey, I'm a great lawyer, I have a great legal idea, let me take up your case. It doesn't work like that. And that is one thing that those who say, who are asking the question, why only now, should understand. That this is when the process really allowed for lawyers who have something to offer to really present that to the people and to provide that representation.
Thank you very much, Dave, my brother. And Mr. Amsterdam, you have the last say, and perhaps you can address this question that I have been hesitating to ask, and Miranda has asked it. How confident are you that mediation will bring the government to the table? So in your closing, as you always say in court, you're summing up. You can address that inevitable question.
And I hope that my comment though is not taken in a bad way. Only God sees everything, knows everything, everything, and so on. As a lawyer, it is not a question for me of percentages and confidence always. And this has nothing to do with law. I have some beliefs. It's better to try and fail than fail to try. I am taking the position that we have a reasonable members that form the government, that the ministries that are involved and who we have written to have persons who are reasonable. They will see the humane side of this matter and will understand that this issue is not about myself and Dr. Williams. It's about the plight of those persons who found themselves in this unfortunate circumstance. It is their plight which we are pursuing and trying to find some redress. So it is not a question for me. I don't want to get into percentages of how confident I am that the government will respond favorably. But in life, you have to have a plan A, a plan B, sometimes a plan C, and a D. And so we have chosen as a strategy, this is our first method that we want to do. Let's talk. If that doesn't work, we then go to plan B, and so on. So I am unable to answer Miranda if she was looking at percentages or for me to say. Some people like lawyers who can tell them, I know I'm going to win the case, or I know this is going to happen and that. I am not one of those lawyers who just tell people things just to give them a good feeling. And so we are hopeful that the government will be responsive and receptive to our suggestion to try to resolve this matter in a way that is amicable and can bring some relief to the people who have suffered. But as Dr. Williams said, we are not doing this from a position of weakness. Very often people believe that it is to say sorry is a sign of weakness. I believe that it is a sign of strength. And so we are not here trying to challenge the government or to embarrass the government or anything like that. We are just here trying to advocate on people who believe that they have been wronged in some way and whose lives have been uprooted, disrupted, and somewhat destroyed in the most brutal manner. And we believe that if the government, us as lawyers, and these people sit around a table, we can resolve this issue and move on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Amsterdam. Thank you very much. Miranda's come back here very strong.
And
she says it.
so that
Sorry.
Amen.
Yes, I thought you were finished. She says that the Chief Justice has suggested mediation. for Rick G and the government. So she's very hopeful that the situation goes to the table in good faith. So I think Miranda is saying here that she didn't ask the question from a standpoint of pessimism, because she has pointed out here, and a very good observation, that the CJ has suggested mediation. She asked, why is that matter in court? So I think we're all on a good page, on the same page here, and on a good page. Mr. Amsterdam, thank you very much for appearing tonight on Politics 101, and to you, Mr. Williams, Dr. Williams, for coming again in short order on another case. I shall be keeping up to date, and Mr. Williams, please keep sending me updates so that I know what's happening. And once we have something to report, I shall be having you gentlemen back for us to report on what's happening. The story tonight is that the people of Mocha are not left out there to dry. We have not turned our backs on them. Ipadaji is raising funds for them. The political parties are doing work on the ground. I'm going to try to have Nima Flubest tomorrow night. Hopefully, she will get better reception. And now the lawyers have come in. I think this is the model as we go forward. So I want to thank the brothers for coming on tonight and for giving us of their perspective and their knowledge and how the law is not always a jackass, and how the law is not always out there floating in outer space, but it has direct significance to our day-to-day lives. Thank you, brothers, and hope to see you soon. And to you, our viewers, you know a lot of love come from me, plenty love. I'm continuously amazed at the kind of native intelligence and sometimes professional and expert intelligence that you bring to bear on this program. Thank you, Audrey. Elliot, Ernest, I haven't seen in a long time. I hope all is well. And to all of you who made it out tonight, thank you all so much. And tomorrow night, I'll be right here continuing to do, you Christians will say, God's work. The Africans will say the ancestors' work. The politicians will say the people's work. But it's work, work, work. We come in peace. And of course, we live in peace. We want to be an example to this country. We don't always settle things with war. Even when war is declared on us, we come in peace. We live in peace. The word is what? Mediation as the first step. Mediation. The ball is in the court of those who hold institutional power. Again, as Alan Fenty would say, all right, again, I'm coming back tomorrow. Our condolences to the family and friends of Alan Fenty, folklorist, thinker, political commentator. I disagree with a lot what he's been writing for the last 3 years. He was my partner. And it's always sad when we lose an icon like Alan Fenty. Good night. See you all tomorrow night.